There we go. We're live. Hello and welcome to today's panel for GuildifyCon. We are here for the topic of system crafting. With us is Lars. I'm going to try this. Macmuller,
That's close enough. Machmüller.
Jonathan Brooks, Joshua Kern, and Ryan Maxwell. All right. So we don't have any questions yet. So I am going to start with my personal question. And let's start with Lars. What would you do when you're writing your book and your system has broken in some way? Like you've written the system, but for some reason it's overpowered as you're going along, or something doesn't work right.
Well, let's just start with saying that has totally happened, and it will happen again in the future because sometimes you just don't manage to plan out like 3 books ahead and see where the hell you're actually going. Um, the thing is, I mean, there are a lot of ways to get things in check, but some of them are patently bad. Like nerfing powers mid-series, that's just a no-go for me. So I think the worst part I've had is where I introduced a part of a deity system in one of my series and then found out halfway that it was going to give my main character way too much power compared to the fact that I wanted him to be slightly underpowered. And then I just had to, just dim down the usage of that system. I just toned down the progression some, kept more or less the original system so I didn't break it noticeably, but then just slowed down the progression for that particular part of the system. I mean, there are other ways, of course, but people hate it when you take away powers or diminish powers that they already had later on in the system. So I'm not doing that.
Nobody likes a nerf bat.
Exactly.
Ryan, do you want to take this question?
Sure. It definitely happens to everybody where you get to a point sometimes where, at least at one point in writing, where the system breaks down, you have to change something. It depends on what you. So I personally am in a position right now where it might be a little difficult because I'm throwing everything over my shoulder onto Royal Road. So going editing is can be a little difficult versus somebody who's just writing out a whole manuscript. But I try to keep track of everything in an Excel spreadsheet that I have, every stat, every piece of information that has to do with the system and how that operates. It's the best thing you can possibly do is try to have that mapped out beforehand, and then I do things in a base 10 system. That really makes everything even easier. The maths aren't so hard. I don't have to focus on they got 0.25 of this or 5 of that or 7 and adding all that up. So um, my biggest key is literally track everything. Keep as many notes as you possibly can. Anytime you add something to the system, be sure you document it because you're going to forget it when you're on that next chapter and you're talking you had to do before, and then you got to stop and go back and read, and you've lost your momentum and whatever that is. So detailed notes is my way to ensure that I don't mess up the system too bad forward.
Yes, we also have a question from a Facebook user. You never know how much AI has progressed lately. Lars, are you a robot?
Nobody can confirm or deny this.
Nobody's actually ever seen him in person.
No. There are a couple of days where I have preferred to not exist.
Okay, we also have. Oh, continue. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, especially one particular drunken night at DragonCon this year. Let's just pretend I didn't exist back then.
We have another question from Kyle Wilkinson. Jonathan, would you like this question? Do you use dice to roll randomly some of your stats?
I've used them before to use some of my stats for some of my other like secondary characters. but I don't usually use them on my main characters because I have a plan for them, and so I need them to be a certain stat kind of breakdown and stuff like that. So I only use those kind of random things for like secondary characters or other characters that aren't ones I have a plan for.
Actually, could we have Jonathan answer the last question too? Because to me,
Sure.
he's
Sure.
like one of the masters of plotting and progression in all the series I've read. It seems like you've got it totally plotted out from the start to the beginning and following the there's no drop off. There's no totally insane overpoweredness.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just trying to keep it moving. If there's something you want to ask or answer to, and I try to move on, let me know, and we'll just go back to it. Jonathan?
Yeah. So yeah, when I start developing a system, that's actually where I start my ideas for books. Is I start with a system instead of like an idea for a story, a system of mechanics, stuff like that. So that's what I have planned out first. So I rarely run into situations where it becomes you can break the system. But when I do find that I have those situations come up, I usually introduce another plot point that not necessarily nerfs it, but counters it in some way, so that I don't have anything that'll break it completely. And I just kind of head it off before that happens. But yeah, I try to think about all the things that could happen, over the course of the series. Initially, you can't think of everything, of course. It's just kind of impossible unless you have it all kind of plotted out beforehand, which I usually don't have the entire series plotted out, but I have a start and a finish, so I know where it's going to go, just not all the stops along the way. So it's just important to kind of get those things done first before you even start writing. Is kind of have that system built so you don't run into those problems. But if you do, there are ways to mitigate. Again, nerfing not the best idea. Or I like to just counter it with something that, oh, you're overpowered, but this other person or other situation kind of negates that overpowered system in place. So
Yes. Okay. And let me think of another question. Unless you want to answer, Joshua.
I mean, sure, I'll answer. But mine's kind of simple. I mean, I always write the first book before I ever release it, anyways. So I can always just go back and correct any issues like that in the book. But also, I like my characters to be a little overpowered, anyways. So I'm fine with a little bit of system breakage in that regard. But
Okay.
I also tend to add little things inside the system that hurt the main characters. So, like in Portals of Albion, the thing that made the main character overpowered and broke the system in that regard also tended to hurt him. So if he used that ability, it sucked away his health. It left him in a disabled state for like the next hour or so. So I mean, it was a two-edged sword kind of a deal. So if I break the system, I'll tend to do something like that.
With the balancing.
Yeah. So I'll usually do it on purpose. In other words.
Okay, we don't currently have any new questions from the audience, so I came up with one, and I will go. When writing a new book or series, how hard is it to come up with a new system, completely different from what you've been doing or what's already out there? Let's see.
I'll go. So I have a lot of different series, and every single one of them is a different system. So 12 different systems. I enjoy creating them. So I find it's fairly easy for me to completely design a whole new system. But however, there are common elements that you're going to see in a lot of systems. Not every system, but different stats that are common. It's more about digging into the mechanics of the world, how that system works, how they interact together. I do a lot of dungeon core, so why do dungeons exist? How do they get their mana, their energy, their dungeon force, whatever. But overall, I try to make each one unique, and have their own unique systems in place and mechanics, so that they're not like repeats. But it is difficult to think of new types of mechanics to add to a brand new system. But that's something I love. That's, like I said, that's where I start. I start with these mechanics. I start with these systems, and I develop the story from there. And that's how I usually get my ideas. The stories I want to write.
Well, Lars, you seem like you can answer this one.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, to me, that is 100% the core part of creating a new series, is creating the system, because so much of the flavor of the story comes from that. I mean, if you want something, it depends if you want something very video gamey or if you want something with a lot of realism. That all has something to do with how you want to create the system. And well, like Jonathan said, there has to be something unique in every system, or there's no reason to read the book, really. I mean, if it's just a repeat of something that's been done to death. But you can't, on the other hand, you can't create something entirely unique either, because there are certain basics. I mean, you have to find something that people recognize from games, from tabletop RPGs, whatever. So you have to have a core of something that people can recognize. And to me, that all comes from games. I mean, probably for a lot of the others here, but like, you pick which games are you actually using as the flavor. So like my World of Chains, that was a lot of EverQuest 2.
I like that.
And a lot of World of Warcraft as well. So basic MMOs. And then Dragon Core Chronicles, that was a lot of Dungeon Keeper. I mean, the whole minion managing and room building thing. But basically taking the games and the flavor that you want to, and then using that as a basis to create something relatively unique but familiar enough that people actually like it.
Yeah, and building off of that, I think it also has to do with the subgenre that you're writing in. There's a basic, I don't want to call them rules, but there is a basic set of kind of contingencies that most people will follow when writing in things like, if you're writing something that's specifically isekai, it's going to be more fantasy style because they're pulling another world. If you're writing in the post-apocalyptic style, you can use earth things to mesh into your system. If you're writing in the dungeon core, you're going to be talking more about dungeon mechanics than you are others. So you can pull from other things that you've seen and heard before and used, while trying to format it into a new way that's going to be, not a direct copy of what somebody else has done. So it is kind of subgenre specific in that way as well. Like, if you get isekai, most people know there's going to be some kind of magic there while they're following stats. So how your magic works is going to be something that you're going to want to try to make at least somewhat unique. But at the same time, almost every system of magic, that you could probably think of has been done. There's still going to be new ideas every time, but I cast this spell because I learned it from a book or a scroll or whatever the case is. So it can kind of depend on where you're writing at that time and where your idea comes from.
Yeah.
Joshua, any input on this one, or do you want the next question?
I'll mainly go for the next question. I mean, I agree with a lot of what they've already said. So I enjoy coming up with the systems, but there's only so much you can do. So I'll generally go with twists whenever I come up with it than entirely new systems. I've done that in the past, and people don't generally like entirely new systems, I've discovered in my books. So they like them, but those aren't the best selling books. So
Okay. Question here from Kyle Wilkinson. Some of you are dungeon divers and others are more stats driven. What drives you in writing the specific subgenre you write in?
for me, it's the story. I just love the story. I love exploring it. I want to know what the characters, what drives the characters, and what they're going for, the ultimate goal. I enjoy the stats in the story, but I'm definitely more of a lit RPG light writer. I don't enjoy the constant page after page after page of stats that some people seem to really enjoy. And what are they? Well, will read it and then they will add up all the different stats just to make sure everything makes sense and everything. That's not me. I will put it there. I will make sure it all makes sense and that it is proper, but that's not what drives me. It's the story. It's ultimately all about the characters for me.
And your audiobook listeners really like that because as an audiobook main person, that giant list of stats looks awesome on the page, not so great to the ear.
Yeah, and I mean, it definitely gives you the endorphin rush of, oh yeah, they just made progress. Oh, I feel that. But like I said, it's just it's not for me as the writer. I'll throw it in, like 3, maybe 4 times in the entire book, but that's it. That's all I'll do.
Okay, Lars, want to take this question?
Oh yeah. Well, to me, it's all about the flavor, about the kind of story I want to write, and the kind of game and feeling I want to create. Like World of Chains, I went pretty stat and skills heavy. There was a lot of Skyrim in there as well, so it had to have a lot of skill increases, a lot of new spells, and a lot of stats, because that's what people expect from an MMO. That's what people expect when they have their old-fashioned MMOs. Their skills increase all the time. Their levels, their what do they call them? Those benchmarks at, say, skill level 10, 25, 50, and so on. So when I write something like that, I want to have a lot of stats and increases and so on for the endorphin rush as well, of course. But when I wrote my latest cyberpunk series, Hackers of Arden, that was a cyberpunk series in a world that was very heavily Shadowrun inspired. So pretty old school, pretty heavy on the mods, but not with a lot of heavy stats. So in that one, we went pretty light on the details. So it all depends on the flavor, I'd say.
Yeah, it absolutely has to do with whatever idea you came up with, because not every idea is going to fit every subgenre. So
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
if you come up with
Absolutely
a specific
true.
idea, I can't have all the it's not going to fit well to have all the dwarves and elves and everything if you're doing a cyberpunk thing, unless it's like in a fantasy world where they got isekai that happens to be that as well. Or if it's post-apocalyptic Earth, we don't have. I don't like in Grand System Betting. It happens here in Earth. It starts in Dallas, Texas, and there's no elves or dwarves or anything like that in there. So unless I come up with some way that they're magically transported there, it's not going to make sense to build a system around a fantasy system around different races. It's all
Hmm.
humans. So
I buy a portal through the vending machine to Planet Dwarf.
Well, I'm more stats driven as far as my stories. I love, like I said, I love creating, crafting these systems. I love the mechanics of it. And the reason I started writing Dungeon Core in the first place was because I love the idea of um, going behind the scenes of how dungeons work and why they work. I love to dig into the the exact way they come about, how they level up, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of my idea behind all my stories, is I want to explore these ways that the different dungeon cores work. So that's kind of where my head is in making all these stories.
And it shows in your books. I mean, seriously, I am goddamn impressed by when you choose a topic, how deep you can go into that and never run out of ideas. You do that so damn well.
Well, thank you. I have a lot of ideas.
We have a
We hope
John.
so, man. You can't stop writing anytime soon.
I know.
We have a specific question for Jonathan here. John, do you plan for the crossovers, like when you're writing your systems? I believe that's what.
Yeah, I did not originally plan for it because I wasn't even expecting it. It was more when I made like the box sets for like Station Cores and Dungeon World and stuff like that. It was kind of more of a fun kind of like what would happen if these two universes combined. So it was more of just a fun idea at first, but then the more I wrote, the more I liked the idea of kind of having these different series interact with each other. And then by the time I wrote Dungeon Fairy, I was just like, well, let me just go for it. So I introduced some elements to the Dungeon Fairy story that had to do with like Station Cores. So by that point, I still wasn't planning on combining the systems. And that was a difficult challenge once I finally started writing initial Dungeon Cores, because if you've got one system kind of interacting with another, that's one thing. But I had one system trying to interact with three other completely different systems, and how they interacted with the world. So that was a huge challenge. But I think I got it working all right.
Yeah, I've done that before. It's an interesting endeavor.
Absolutely.
Okay, and since we've answered that question, next question from JD Glasscock. What has you decide what their crafting focus is? The plot or whim develop and then develop plot around it? So Ryan, you want this question?
Sure. It sounds kind of like this is about actually crafting items, or is it we talking about? But mainly, what I look for in there is that's kind of story driven. What do we need that's going to come up in the story later on? Well, it's best to try to, I say plot because I'm not a plotter, I'm a pantser. So half the time my things just suddenly appear in the story and I'm like, oh, where did that come from? But but it's usually something that gets you to another point, something that has to be used later on in there. So I focus on the items that are going to be related to either the class or whatever that a character is going to be using or needing for getting to that next point. Because I usually have overarching ideas to get from point A to point B. I know what the beginning is, I know what the end is, and I know I need to hit points, subpoints, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the middle to get to that point so that it makes sense. And if they're going to craft something, then it usually has something to do to build on one of those points that I have as well. Yeah, that's true. I am a shoot them in the pantser.
I bet even when you say you're a pantser, you still have a pretty solid idea about the type of class and the type of character your dude is going to progress on. So you already know the type of style he's going to get. You just don't know if he's going to get smite or water magic or whatever. I mean, the specifics of it along the way.
Yeah, when people say pantser, some people automatically get the idea that you have no idea what you're doing. You've sat down and you've just started typing words, and that's absolutely not the case. Even for pantsers, what we say what we mean when we say that is that there's going to be ideas that will suddenly be like, oh, I did not plan for them to suddenly walk into that hotel and the fight broke out. That kind of thing just happens all of a sudden. But we absolutely have a beginning, a middle, an end, and
Yep.
major points that have to get you to that, because otherwise you're going to be totally lost and you're going to give up on it eventually.
Yeah, you have to know what you're writing towards. I mean, otherwise you're not going anywhere. You're just toddling along. I've tried that before. It doesn't work.
No, it does not.
Jonathan, you are obviously the crafting guy from your crafting dungeon.
Yeah, I do a lot of crafting in my books, and it has to do with like my love of crafting from games and stuff like that. But I typically plot it out beforehand because I know which ones I want to do. And even with like the Crafter's Dungeon, I had a list of all the different types of crafting I wanted the main character to learn and hit along the way. So I know beforehand which ones that will work for the story and stuff like that. It's usually not just whim or anything; it's all plot.
Joshua or Lars, do you want the one to go at this one?
I saw a
I'm
couple
not-
of the next questions. I'll jump on.
I'm not usually super focused on crafting in my books. Some of the characters do it, but I usually leave it up to the characters themselves on what they want to do. I don't pick it out for them. So, like, one of the characters in my stories is an artificer, and I mean, for him, that just made sense because he was studying, I think it was electrical engineering or computer science on Earth before he was brought over to his new world. And I mean, it just made sense for him. I didn't pick it out. It was just something that, he decided to do. So, but yeah, I don't pick it out for them. It's just what they decided to do. But yeah, I don't focus on crafting in my stories, just because the stories are plot character driven, and they're usually working towards their goal. So there's not a lot of time to take a step back and do crafting. Well, we're working towards that. Not saying there isn't any time, and those stories that have that time generally do have a little bit of crafting in them. So.
All right. Since we have a backlog of questions, I'm going to move to the next question and then go to Lars. Facebook user question. I would consider an RPG leveling system as hard magic, clearly defined rules and so on. What is the most well-known example of a soft leveling power system that remains as vague as possible but still retains its popularity / effectiveness? That everything doesn't end up feeling like a Deus Ex Machina.
I mean, there are so many examples of soft leveling systems, especially in older fantasy, high fantasy. And you could pretty much name every single one of the older high fantasy series. Lord of the Rings and whatever. They all have the soft systems. There might be some progression, like Gandalf going from Gandalf the Grey to Gandalf the White and becoming stronger. But it's all behind the scenes. We don't see any hard progression. But there's also a lot of hand-waving around that. Some of the best ones for progression, I'd say, back then that had soft magic systems, but still had a relatively clearly delineated progression in them, were something like the Magician by Trudy Canavan, which at least had some sort of class system and change where you could see, okay, now they are learning this and this, they are becoming wiser and more learned across the years. But yeah, generally it's a crapshoot. There's with soft progression, you will often see a bit of hand waving where you don't really know how they get stronger or how much they get stronger. It's just basically now they are stronger and they can beat the bad guy. Oh, Paul, I hate you so much.
Sorry.
You
Jonathan,
get that level, man.
Yeah.
answer the question.
Yeah. You know, a lot of the old fantasy books, that's what I always wanted when I read them, because I used to have a huge library of paperbacks that I got from like used bookstores and stuff like that. So I read a lot of older fantasy books, and I always wanted some sort of progression system that you could actually look at and see. But I'm just trying to think of other ones that are like academy based ones, like Harry Potter. Like each year you've got they can do more stuff. And I'm just trying to think of any other ones, but that's probably the most popular one that I can think of. That,
Also, The
kinda
Magicians by Lev Grossman.
Yeah, that one too.
I can think of two of my favorites are the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson and the Magic.
No, he uses hard magic on that one.
Oh, I would have said it was
Yeah, well-
soft systeming is what I was going for.
Oh,
he does
okay, yeah.
stats and all that kind of thing with.
Yeah.
And then I would also have said the Magic 2.0 series by Scott Meyer. I don't know if you've seen that one or not, since it's
Yeah.
I
It's
still
all-
have to read that one. I keep
It's-
seeing it mentioned though.
It's so funny. It's absolutely hilarious. The guy stumbles in on a computer program, and then he uses this computer program to change the world around him. It's
Huh.
not hard set stats like a lit RPG is, so it's a lot of people consider it like lit RPG adjacent, since it's
Oh,
not.
okay. Maybe that's why I keep seeing it mentioned then.
Yeah, I mean, both of those and Sanderson in general are very hard into progression fantasy territory.
Yeah, Sanderson is like pretty famous for doing hard magic systems, so he has all his rules.
Yeah.
Okay, Joshua, you want to end on this question or no?
I don't even remember what the question was, honestly.
It was about
Are you wearing pants right now?
Me? Oh yeah, totally. You want me to stand up?
Oh no, please. God,
What is a well-known example of a soft leveling power system that is big as possible but still popular?
I mean, yeah, Harry Potter was going to be my answer, anyways. I mean, that's the one that like everybody knows. It's about as soft can be. It's all hand wavium on that one.
Okay. Then everybody feels like we've answered that question, and we will move on. JD Glasscock has a question here. Do you find keeping track of the math a challenge as story progresses? And
Excel.
the week
Just keep a
will go,
great Excel spreadsheet. It's not that hard.
Exactly.
with
If you don't keep notes, there's no way you're going to keep track of your system. You're going to totally lose track of all the math. If you don't
Yeah,
write
I
down
mean,
exactly what you did.
every single story I write has like a story Bible along with it. It has all of my notes. It has all of my stat sheets. It has Excel spreadsheets. It has everything. I mean, if you're not keeping notes, the stat sheets, everything, you're going to get lost regardless. So, yeah, it's not that hard as long as you keep it updated.
I'll come with a hot take here and say every person here has at one point not kept good enough
Yep.
notes and lived to regret it.
Yeah, that's when you spend the next like 6 hours tracking down every single thing. And then you just like, I need to do better at this.
yes,
Yeah.
like in the rewriting whole parts of the book because this is off.
And
Yeah,
Well,
you develop your own system for it.
Yeah.
Everybody develops their own system that's slightly different from the next person on how they keep notes of it. Like I found for me that the easiest way to do it was I literally would take the whole stat sheet and paste it in an Excel spreadsheet with the chapter that I put it in, and underneath it notes on what things went up in that, so that every time, by the time I'm done writing, I'll have 12 different stat sheets with chapter references, so I know exactly where it was. I know exactly what I added in there for them to go up in whatever stats they got for that time, and where they placed them, so that you can reference back at that. It's not an easy task, but doing that in advance saves you days and days of time later.
In one of my stories, I have something similar where all of their stats that get upgraded, why they get upgraded, the certain modifiers that go into effect at each level, and why they would have been upgraded at that level, bonuses, things like that. And that only goes into effect on that story. Lars, I'm going to kick your ass. But I mean, yeah, that only is effective on that one story because not all stories have the bonuses and modifiers. I'm still going to beat you up, Lars. Come over from Swedenland.
Oh, damn you. That was very American, by the way, Swedenland. I like that.
I liked it. I thought so.
Yeah, I use Excel and like a Word like notes system, but like a lot of like my dungeon cores, I have to keep track of not just the stats, but like the monsters that I have, or even the monsters that the main characters face. So it's a lot of work. But yeah, pretty much Excel and other note programs on Word and stuff like that.
Okay, so let's move on to the next question because we've got a bunch of questions and we're getting lower on the time, so I'm just going to try to knock them out. Another question here from Kyle Wilkinson. We've seen Chef, Art RPG, and Slice of Life and many other subgenres. What subgenre haven't we seen as much of, and what would you like to see more written? Jonathan?
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to put a real quick plug in there that I absolutely want to see more of JD's idea of the speed dating, disco, dancing, sumo wrestling, thong, lit RPG stuff written. That definitely needs to come out.
Oh, what was that one anime where they're doing the butt wrestling thing? We need more of that.
Yes, we do.
Do not give some of those authors ideas, man. You won't see the crud in Dungeon Crawler Carl. You just watch.
Yeah. I would like to see more card-based ones. I used to play Magic a lot, and there's some out there, but I'd like to see more of them. So I think that's what I would love to see more of.
My next one is totally Magic the Gathering based, so I am 100% on that one as well.
Nice.
Also, hard on the crafting books. I really love those. I mean, like the latest one, the Dwarven Brewer one, that was fantastic.
Yes.
And also some of the smithing books and even some of the Russian ones that got the crafting subgenre started. Mirror World, I still love, and yeah, one of the OG ones like what's it called, Legendary Moonlight Sculptor. I love them all. I mean,
yeah, that's what it is. Kaijo, something. I enjoy reading those books. I just don't enjoy writing them, which is weird. My dad was a blacksmith for a number of years, so like I know the stuff. I just don't enjoy writing it, but I do enjoy reading it.
I mean, have any of you read, for instance, like Nathan Amy's Black Dawn? Those books have an excellent crafting take on everything, and it just works. I mean, taking crafting, making it realistic, and then pushing it down into a tabletop RPG system, stuff like that, I would love to see more of.
I think my issue with doing crafting that's too realistic is the reviews you always get from people who think they know but don't know. Like they tear you down, man. I included in one of my books, I put a simple thing with trucks and trailers and everything, something I have done in real life, mind you. And they were like, man, you need to learn how to use trailers and driving and stuff like that. And I was like, dude, I've done this in real life. And they will just tear you down for anything and everything. So even though I've done that stuff with my dad, I would not want to do it in a book.
Yeah, it's always like that. But then again, I mean, that is also part of the process about system crafting, right? Like, how realistic do you want to go? If you have like a I don't know about you, Ryan. How high magic is your system in general? Is it like dark and realistic, or is it pretty up there with the shinies and the magic everywhere?
It's a lot of the shinies and magic everywhere.
Yeah, and exactly for something like that, you wouldn't put a lot of crafting in there that's hyper realistic because that goes opposite to the whole high magic thing.
Hmm.
So you'd go something like, okay, you take like a crafting choice from one of the games, like take Witcher 3 or something. You take a crafting window where you have like 4 different windows where you can put in choices, and then you have your crafting like that. It's super magic, super shiny and easy. But if you have something dark, bloody, and realistic, well, you might actually benefit from doing it more realistic, and you can watch the smithing, watch the sparks fly as he hammers on that like on that smithy.
Well, I mean, even if you're doing it ultra realistic, it's still a fantasy. I mean, at some point, the hand wavium, the magic comes into play, you know? And that's the point where, like, the reader needs to just let it go. And the reviewers almost never do.
Yeah.
Well, it is your guys' fault you started talking about butt wrestling and now you're Jez's in the chat. So
Oh yeah, somebody said "but" 3 times in a row, and he's here. That's how it
Yep,
works.
we summoned him.
I think you will live to regret that.
Yep.
No, Jez is cool, but just making jokes. Okay, let's move on to our next question from Jay Baraz. I'm probably saying that wrong. I apologize, Jay. I just not with it today on the pronunciation. Do you find it better to have a simplistic system for your lit RPG or a more complex system in terms of stats, skills, leveling, etc.? What are the benefits to your story for either type? And let's see, Jonathan, do you want this question?
Sure. I think, at least in my books, that I like a more complex system in terms of stats and stuff like that. But the advantage of having a kind of like a less complex or more simplistic system is you have more freedom to do some things that you normally wouldn't be able to do in terms of a system that's more restrictive. So it's more of how do you want your story to go. If you want it to be really strict and keep to the system, you can't work without outside the lines. That's kind of, it depends on how as a writer you want to do your story. And then if it's more simplistic, like I said, you can go above and beyond it. You can break the system a little bit more without having too many consequences and stuff like that. So it just depends on your preferences, really, as far as I'm concerned.
Lars, you want this question? You seem really interested in it.
No, I mean, I honestly that was perfect. I mean,
Yeah.
he is entirely right. I mean, once you go hyper specific and hyper detailed in your system creation, well, you have to make it balance out, because when you add math, somebody out there is going to be a huge nerd and actually math it out. So they are going to call you on it when you make it. Is that you?
Yeah, I am a huge nerd. Hi.
But yeah, I mean, then you have to balance it out. You have to actually balance your classes and stuff, make them work against each other. If you keep it less detailed, well, yeah, you're gonna be able to allow yourself a lot of extra leeway to create something just for the flavor of it, like, or something that's honestly completely broken. Like you take in a Dungeon Crawl Card, especially the first couple of books, they are pretty loose on the mechanics, and there is some stuff in there where you just think, "Wee, okay, I don't want to do the math on that."
Yeah. Now, if you make it super specific, you have to account for pretty much every action they do at that point. If they get, they trip over a rock, that's, -1 health point or whatever. Whereas if it's not super specific, you can let that go. You can let it fly. It's not anything. But when you're restricting, everything has to be accounted for. So it just it gets super time draining.
You also have to ensure that you're not overdoing it with the crunch, because sometimes you'll lose people on that. You know,
Yeah.
if you get into, there's literally a system prompt for every action the person takes, then and then congratulations, you've turned right in the dungeon. We're going to get to a point where every single thing is tracked, and you'll lose the story if you get too involved in the system. I mean, I
Yeah,
totally
and
get
that's
that.
exactly what that would be.
Yeah, I totally get that people love the system and learning more about it. I found a good balance for me was I've been writing in World Anvil, and so I'll put up wiki articles for something in there, and then when everything comes out, I'll just release the world for the public view in there, and if somebody wants to learn more about it, you can go check out some of the mechanics in World Anvil instead of having to compile everything into a book and spend weeks again making sure that all that straightens out at the end.
Okay.
Well, one tiny addition, because there is one advantage to having something that's pretty detailed and hyper focused and deep when it comes to complexity. Like take something like He Who Fights with Monsters. That is pretty goddamn complex at this point. However, it has the depth and the time and storyline involved where you can actually tell, okay, damn, there's actually some balance to this. So when it's done right, it feels more realistic because of the added detail. So you can actually tell, okay, fair enough, this main character's class is great, but it's not entirely overpowered, because put up against this type of character, he would have his ass kicked because this and this and this.
Okay. We're moving on to the next question because we're running very short on time here. We have 13 minutes left. And I'm just going to have one or two authors answer and then go to the next question so we can get as many done as possible. Our next question is from Facebook user. Were there any elements of your crafting system you truly loved but ultimately had to get rid of for narrative or other reasons? Ryan, with this one?
Sure. So not for me. I'm usually an additive person versus a subtractive. So I very rarely find myself actually having to take anything out of a system. It's usually that I have to go back and add something in because I wanted to account for a plot point that I have come up with. Again, the whole pantsing thing, they've ended up in a certain fight or a certain situation that wasn't planned, but doesn't mean it can't happen. So I'm more of an additive than a subtractive person. But I think the main thing that I've had to do in the past is the biggest one I've ever had to do in the past was a removal of a magic element that didn't make sense with what was going on in there. I've done that one time before. That I had something added in that was like, I don't know, gravity magic or something that I was like, nah, that doesn't make sense to have in this. So it does happen, but again, I'm more of an additive than a removal person.
Lars, you want this one, or?
Well, I've only done it once. To be honest, I mean, I am totally with Ryan here. I am more an additive person, but in general, no. I mean, could I just have the question again, just to be entirely sure I get it all?
Is there anything that you loved about your system that had to be removed for narrative reasons?
Yeah. Now again, sorry. I have figured out that along the way that I had added a bit too much complexity in my systems in general. So I had to tone down some of the elements, like adding too many elements to the story, like a deity system, a social reputation system, quest systems. I mean, too many systems, to be honest. So I had to just quietly tone a bit of it out, like the reputation part of it. I had to tone down the importance of that in later books, because otherwise it would just be system upon system upon system. So yeah, to a certain degree.
Okay. I'm going to move on to the next question because, again, we're running short on time and we still have to do the author promo at the end. So, okay, the next question here is also from Kyle Wilkinson. Who, if any other authors, has helped you inspire some of your system, and have you reached out to some of them for advice? Gonna go with. Sorry,
I'll go.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I was gonna say Joshua, but go ahead, John.
Oh, that's fine. So yeah, I was really inspired by Dakota Kraut and Jeffrey Falcon Logue with their original, Dungeon Core, Divine Dungeon, and Slime Dungeon. I loved there's just the way their dungeon cores were set up, how they had like assistants and like fairies, pixies, that kind of stuff. I loved the way they had that set up, so I wanted to kind of match that in a way in my books. But I just kind of took that general idea and ran with it from there. So I haven't reached out to any of them for advice, but reading all their books is pretty much, all I needed to kind of get a good idea of what I wanted to do with those kind of systems.
Okay. Joshua, would you like to?
I'm trying to. I haven't reached out to. I sent him an email, but I haven't actually reached out to him for help or anything like that. But I'm trying to remember the fellow's name, or even the series. I'm looking at it on my computer right now. Sorry. But there was only the one series I was looking at for system help. But outside of that, no. I mean, most of the time, it's just been me. So no. That was the only time I've ever actually reached out to another author for help with a system or been really inspired in regards to my own stuff. So.
Okay. Let's see. One last question here before we get to the author promos. My JD Glasscock, have you ever been boxed in by the system you created that in later books you wish you hadn't have done? Lars, want to handle this one?
Not really. I mean, in general, I've been pretty lucky in making the system go more or less in the direction I wanted to, but there has been a lot of wrangling along the way to make it go in the direction I actually wanted it to. So, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much a pantser too, not entirely, but yeah, that does sometimes get me into GRRM territory where I've written a lot of plot side stories, and I don't entirely know how to progress them. So yeah, sometimes I can get caught.
Well, Jonathan, you want another question before we move to program?
Sure. Yeah, I've especially in the later books, I realized some of my systems were a little more restrictive toward the end game, I guess you could say. I've had to kind of adjust some of my plot points in order to either get around those little obstacles or just kind of run with them and figure out, see if I can get it still to the conclusion without having to break the system.
All right, we will move to author promos. Let's start with Joshua, and then we'll go to Ryan, and just go, this way around the thing.
Okay. Well, obviously, I'm Joshua Kern. I've released 3 books this year. The Well Within was in January. I did The Game of Gods, the final book in that series, wearing the shirt for it, was in July. And then the first book in a new series, Runic Cultivator with Aethon, was in August. All of those can be found on Amazon. Just finished the second book in Runic Cultivator and the third book in my Nameless Chronicle series. I'm doing the rewrites on both of those, and you can find a new series of mine on Royal Road called Dungeonfall. So, Ryan?
Well, my name is Ryan Maxwell. I'm a relatively new author. I have a few manuscripts that I've written that nobody else gets to read, but I do have a story out on Royal Road, so I'm kind of a Royal Road author for right now called Grand System Vending. Basic premise is it's post-apocalyptic Earth. and the world is being inducted into the intergalactic federation of planets, and they're because of that, they're now mana is now exists on Earth because they planted a mana core in the world to generate mana for everybody, and they now have a system that everybody has to follow. And they noticed that vending machines were something that humans really loved, so they have integrated that into the way that that humans can increase their survivability. They can kill monsters and get monster cores and use those to purchase items from vending machines, such as weapons and armor and so what have you. So the characters are absolutely hilarious. Just a band of people like myself who are all constantly ragging on each other, and I think hilarity ensues with that as they're going through. So we're at about 30,000 views now, so it's doing pretty well online. So I'm looking forward to getting the finishing of the book out there. I do release a new chapter every day, so look forward to hopefully getting some more people to read that and give me some feedback on it.
I'll have to put that on my very long to be read list. Curses, you keep growing it. Jonathan?
I'll go. So I have a lot of different series out there. I think I've actually 13 series. Most of them are Dungeon Core. So you may have heard of Dungeon World, Station Cores, Dungeon Crafting, that kind of stuff. Right now, my main focus has been The Fusionist and Academic Confusion. Those are just straight lit RPG books, and those ones have been doing really, really well. I took a slight break from Dungeon Core to get into just straight lit RPG, and I've had a lot of fun with that. Right now, for Halloween, I have my Halloween Core novella is free right now for anybody who wants to pick it up, and the rest of the series is on sale, of course, as well. But the free one is actually Halloween Core, so get it while the season's here.
Lars?
Yeah, I have 3 series out right now. One is already finished, Hackers of Artem. That is cyberpunk, heavy on the outlaw part of things, tons of mods and damage and dastardly bastards. Then I have the World of Change. That's Bard lit RPG, and which is all about the backstabbing and diplomacy and all the social parts of being a bard, and of course music. And I have the Dragon Core Chronicles that I am working on finishing right now, writing the 6th book, and that one will be finished in a couple of months. So now's the perfect time to dig in. That's all about Dungeon Keeper style dragon base building, basically.
Okay, we almost perfectly finished that one there. I will throw in a last question just because we have 2 minutes. So you have a lot of systems interacting like with each other. Like some people have titles, and then they didn't get like marks, or and then you have your inventory if you have that on your character. How do you develop those that in a way that they mesh well and you can keep track of everything? Somebody answer real quick. Sorry.
Well, I'd say to me that's again about the flavor. So basically, depending on what kind of story you want to tell, if you want something super high magic, you can make a lot of. Well, magic does this. If you want it more realistic, you'd probably cut down on the magic parts. You might not want an inventory. You might want to have people actually carve the crafting items out of stuff instead of just touching the corpse and having the items appear. So depending on the kind of story and the kind of flavor you want, that would define what kind of game elements I'd add.
Yeah, do we want looting to be hardcore or easy?
Exactly.
Yes. I think it's very important for you to flush out where your story is going to go before you really start hardcore adding your system elements. You want to know where the story is going to go, so you know where you need to add those elements in and what needs to come in. If you try to do, I think Jonathan does his off of the system first. He has an idea for a system, but once you get plot points going in there, I'm sure, Jonathan, you still add on to that system once you know where the story is going to go. So the story plays a huge role in where your system's going to go.
Definitely.
All right, we have like 5 seconds left, so everyone start waiting. Thank you so much for the battle. You guys are awesome.
Bye, guys. Thanks.